Hi everyone, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, something that I'm passionate about, and it has to do with the some issues that are not talked about, issues with the criminal justice system. We all know that there's issues, but there's some things that I think are very overt, very blatant, very egregious, and they're not discussed by obviously not white stream media. And it's I don't hear really too many advocates in looking for criminal reform, right? Criminal justice reform, really discuss some of these things. And I think it's just because of my unique experience. Maybe I just saw that a little more and felt it a little more than maybe some of the people that are advocating for some of the reform. But I wanted to discuss some of those. And for those of you that don't know me, don't know my story. I 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I made a series of bad decisions that made me look guilty. It was an unfortunate situation. It was a self-defense situation, self-defense case. But I made some decisions that made me look guilty, and that led to me being wrongfully charged and wrongfully convicted. And then I worked hard, incredibly hard, went through the most difficult period in my life to be able to get that overturned, and that's why I'm here before you guys today. Without further ado, I'll introduce to you what the three topics are, and they may not make sense to you when I tell you the subjects, but I'll go and explain. The first one is there's some unfair advantages that are inherently part of the system that favor the state. So the moment somebody's charged, and you might know some of them, and maybe I'll touch on some of them you haven't heard of. Number two is that the criminal justice system, and this is a big one, it fails to take into account human nature, right? For any of you who study psychology or understand a little bit about human nature, there's some major flaws, right, that we have as human beings that most of us, right, not all of us, so we're all in different stages, right, on that journey, right, on that path to enlightenment and understanding and all that. But the criminal justice system fails to take that into account, and I'll give you guys specific examples of how that plays out. And I won't be able to cover everything. This is a short video. Same thing with the first point, and same thing with the third point. I'm just going to cover just a few quick points, but there's so much more to it, right? I could talk to you guys about this for hours, but we're not going to do that, not in this video. So the third one is that after somebody's convicted, the challenges are almost insurmountable, and the system is set up to where if you're convicted, you're hit, you're done. Like there are some people that get their convictions overturned, but that's the exception, and it's the exception. And the reason that's important and the reason that should matter to you is because you probably have a notion of the fact that people that are innocent get convicted, right? But you have no idea. Not only are people that are completely innocent, right? Not only do you have a significant percentage of people that are convicted that are completely innocent, but in addition to that, you have people that may have done something this small, but because of the way the system is set up, they end up getting overcharged, overconvicted, and they'll end up spending decades in prison when they really, I mean, I hate to use the word deserve, right? Because who am I to judge and decide what somebody deserves? But you get the idea, right? You get the idea. I don't mean deserve, but I mean it's just not fair. It's not just. It's not equitable. Use whatever word you want to use that makes you feel good about, or that explains that notion to you, right? But you get it. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first one. So unfair advantages for the state. And like I said, I'm only going to cover just three of them, but there's many of them, and I lived through those. So the first one is in a trial setting. A lot of times what you'll have is a prosecutor will introduce evidence that he's not supposed to. It could be accidental, it could be strategic, where he might do it on purpose. I couldn't prove to you, right, that a prosecutor's going to do this on purpose. Ethically, he's not supposed to. So we're going to assume for the sake of this video that it was done inadvertently, right? He introduces evidence he's not supposed to, and it could be in the form of he has a police officer, and police officers, not to mention, for example, that defendant maybe has a prior conviction for something that's not related to this case at all, and he'll blurt it out. Or maybe the defendant, right, wasn't able to make bail, which that's most defendants, right? They can't make bail, and you're not supposed to mention that, right? And that comes out. Or maybe a witness, they put an ex-wife or an ex-husband or something, right, a neighbor, and they blurt out something they're not supposed to that makes the defendant look guilty. I mean, you get the idea, right? So what they do, right, typically is rarely will they do a mistrial. A mistrial where they go, okay, well, this trial is ruined, it's no good, we're going to start over, let's schedule another trial, because you've already tainted the jury's mind. Rarely does that happen. Rarely. Usually what happens is they will give jury instructions, which is instructions to the jury to ignore that, right? They'll strike it from the record. They'll say, you're not to consider that, you're not to take that into account, you're supposed to pretend that, that wasn't said, right? But the reason that gives an unfair advantage to the state is because if the state, right, knows that they can dance on that line of what's admissible, not admissible, what should be said and not said, if they dance down, right on the, on the edge of that line, and something inadvertently gets said, they know that the jury's still going to hear it, right? They still get to introduce that evidence. They still get to present that, and it could be something that could be incredibly damaging, that could hurt the defendant, right? And the fact that that there is a solution to, right? You request a mistrial is given. The fact that that's not done typically, right? That's not the standard protocol. And I understand to some degree why that is, right? It's costs, but there's also a life, on the line, right? Somebody's life, and it's not just that person's life. It's them, their spouse, their children, their parents, everybody that knew and loved that person, right? Everybody whose life they touched. And not only that, but it affects the entire community, right? So when you're looking at costs, you know what I mean? Like, if you're really looking at the real cost, the true cost, take all that into account, right? What's a wrongful conviction gonna cost society and everyone that knew that person, as opposed to, well, we have to do a new trial, so now we have to go through this process. It's gonna cost us another $10,000, right? Don't know what the number is. I'm just throwing a number out there. So that's an unfair advantage. It's typically that's already built into the system. Rarely do they give mistrials. Number two, and this one's one that that's very sensitive, right? A lot of people don't talk about it, but I can tell you that I talked to a lot of attorneys that admitted this to me. I won't say their names, but I've talked to a lot of attorneys. When I say a lot, I mean attorneys represent me, attorneys represent other people, attorneys now that I'm in the, in that industry, right? I'm in the industry in the legal field, have admitted to me that, rarely will you find a judge that's completely fair, right? I mean, whenever you get a judge that's fair, right, to both sides, like, they're excited about it. They think they're lucky, they're fortunate. Because what happens is most judges favor the prosecution. And that's an ugly truth that you probably didn't know about, or maybe didn't want to hear. Definitely some people didn't want to hear it, but that is the truth, right? Like, let's be honest. Judges favor the state. And the reason that's important is because there are tons of decisions that get made pre-trial, during trial, and even after trial, right? Where there's tons of discretion for the judge. And by discretion, I mean there is no black letter law, like it's not zeros and ones, right? It's a range, it's a spectrum, and the judge can decide, right, which way he's going to go, right? Whether he's going to go with a 0 or 1, but the basis for forming that decision is not binary, right? He's got, like, discretion. He's got his own judgment to rely on. He can, he knows what the law is, but the law doesn't say you have to rule this way. He has to make his own decision. So that's a problem, and I'm sure it's worse than, in some states, versus others. But that was a shocker to me, right? To hear defense attorneys admit that, and in a very candid way, right? In a very candid way where, it was almost like it was painful for some of them to admit that. Number three, another kind of disadvantage, right, within the criminal justice system. This one's a little more common, and I won't be able to delve into it, too much in this video, but the prosecution has unlimited resources. You know what I mean? They are the state, right? Whatever state that is, they are the state. They might, quote unquote, have a budget, but the budget's significantly bigger than it is for public defenders, right? Usually public defenders have to bid for their contract, and so they have to try to, stay within a certain number. Not only that, but it's not, even though it's depending, I've looked at some of these contracts, the numbers are in the millions, right? But if you break it all down by defendant, there's a huge incentive for them, right? In order to be profitable, to be a viable business, even if they're set up as a nonprofit, they still, don't let that fool you. All that means is they don't pay taxes, but they still have to make a profit, or at least at the very minimum have to break even, right? Because otherwise, where does the money come from? They have to pay salaries, they have to pay office space, they have to pay for all that stuff. So they have very tight budgets where the prosecution doesn't have to worry about that, right? Whether you're talking about experts, whether you're talking about, and experts are a big deal. There's all sorts of experts you can bring in a trial that can help you get a fair trial, have a decent chance at winning, right? where it's an expert that specializes in misidentification of witnesses, right, or of the defendant, right? People get it wrong all the time. Or experts that have to do with, a crime scene reconstruction, right? Prosecution might be alleging that something happened a certain way and it's preposterous, but unless you have an expert that explains it and does a great job with it, right? And you need a quality expert, and the defense will go for the cheapest expert they can find, right? Usually they'll look for the most affordable expert in that field, where the prosecution has the luxury of going, well, who's the best we can find in this industry? Who's the best blood spatter expert? Who's the best crime scene reconstruction expert? Who's the best ballistic expert, right? And that's a major luxury, like for them to be able to do that. And it's not even just the experts. It goes on and on, right? It has to do with the quality of the exhibits. It has to do with the fact that the prosecution, right, they can extend the trial for 3 months or 3 months or 3 years, right? It doesn't matter. They're going to get paid their salary. It doesn't matter. They work for the state. That's not the case for a public defender at all. They have a budget. They have, there's only so many days and so many weeks they can spend on the trial for a defendant. And if they do end up spending, 3 months on a case, right? Not on a case, but on a trial for a defendant, then that hurts a number of other defendants, because they have to spend less time with those, because once again, they have budgets, and those are tight budgets. Those are specific numbers that they have to stick to. These are contracts that they sign with the county or the state or whomever, right? So anyways, those are some disadvantages. The second point, right? The second point here is that another flaw with the criminal justice system, right, as a subject, is the fact that it fails to take into account human nature, right? And I'll give you guys just a few examples. I can go on about this for a pretty long time, but I'll give you guys just 3 quick examples. So as human beings, we are quick to make assumptions, right, based on appearances. We all do that, right? It's just human nature. Subconsciously, we just do that. So somebody, for example, somebody that looks like me, right? Some people would assume automatically, oh, that dude probably did something he wasn't supposed to do. He looks like a bad guy, right? He's got a shaved head. Something's wrong with him. I mean, it's, I've seen the movies, right? I've seen the shows. He looks like, right? And it doesn't even have to be something like a shaved head. It could just be simply, you guys know this, some people just, and I might fall within that category, some people just have a face that doesn't look very friendly. And that's just how you're born, right? That's just who you are. Like, that's just, you can't change that. So you might be charged with something, right? That's real egregious, right? That whether it's robbery or an assault or whatever it is, right? Something that is indicative of a violent nature. And you might have a face, right? A grimace, a scowl, or just a face that looks like you're not that friendly. And as human beings, right? It happens. We will assume that. Number 2, and all 3 of these are related, right? Number 2 is that we as human beings, and we all know this, we're easily persuaded by rhetoric. And if you look at, for a prosecution of someone, right, they allow the prosecutor at the closing arguments to get 2 cracks at the apple. They get to do their closing argument, the defense goes, and then the prosecutor goes again. If you know anything about marketing, psychology, and persuasion, that's a huge advantage for the prosecution. And it's an unfair one, but it's been around forever. No one ever questions it or challenges it, right? Another thing, a lot of times prosecutors, and I say a lot of times, I mean, that's quite often, they're very good at rhetoric. They're very persuasive, right? They're almost theatrical. And I say almost, I mean, some of them, really, it's an act they put together, right? I can tell you that in my case, I mean, the dude would have won an Oscar, you know what I mean? Like the way that he did his opening arguments and closing arguments. And it's not just in my case. I've watched a number of trials, and that's something that, good prosecutors are known for, right? And if you understand the how easily human beings are persuaded, well, that's got to be tempered. There's got to be something that's got to be done about that. A solution could be discussed in another video, but you see my point. If you got a prosecutor who's great with words, he's great with, evoking emotions, he can easily, get somebody to do something that they maybe don't necessarily believe, or, a simple example, right? Unrelated to criminal justice system. I mean, how many people have ever been sold by a great salesperson, right? You really didn't want to buy that, but they were so good that they got you to buy it, right? Well, that's how it is within the criminal justice system, right? If you have a great prosecutor who's amazing at painting this horrible picture of a defendant, right? The likelihood that defendant will be convicted is significantly higher. And then the third one within that subject is that people are not always honest. You know what I mean? And we all know that. And what I mean by that is, People will sometimes, when they're asked initially, about their past and experiences that they've had, to try to determine, right, when they're doing the jury selection, people don't always tell the truth. No one verifies it. And I've seen cases where somebody got lucky and they were able to discover, right, that maybe one of the jurors had been a victim of a similar crime, but on the questionnaire he didn't admit to that. But that's not verified, right? And there's no one ever follows up with that, right? And if you do follow up with it, good luck trying to figure it out, trying to, you know what I mean? Like, I could imagine how somebody might go through great lengths to try to figure that out, after the fact, after you're convicted, but it would be incredibly difficult. But before, right, before trial, you just don't have a chance to. That's not even you don't have the time to, or the energy or the resources to do something like that. So people are dishonest. People are given very specific jury instructions, but do they follow them? I mean, beyond a reasonable doubt, like, what does that mean? And it gets defined, right, in a jury instruction, but how many people actually follow that? I've seen cases, I've read cases, case law, where a juror admitted he didn't, that she didn't follow the jury instruction, right? That it wasn't about, beyond a reasonable doubt. For her, it was a dream that she had. She had a dream that the defendant was guilty, and that's what she based it on. There was another one that's another case. A juror admitted that the reason they convicted the person, not because they believed he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, is because they didn't like the way the defendant looked at them. Really? What if it's murder? What if it's like aggravated, like sexual assault of a child? And this person, for whatever reason, just didn't, when he looked up, just didn't look at the juror the right way, or the way that the juror wanted to be looked at. So now this person's going to spend the rest of their life in prison because of a look. We as human beings are not always honest. We don't follow instructions. We should, and we all have biases, right? And we're not supposed to use them, but we all have biases. What's the solution, right? We start using AI, or what are we going to do, right, to try to eliminate some of this? But that's for another video, right? Another thing too, you should take this into account, right? Like you got, and I've seen this, it happened in my case, I've seen it in many cases, and it happens, right? A bunch of jurors get together, and then you have one that doesn't agree, or two that don't agree. But you have 9 or 10 that do agree, right? That they feel like the person is guilty. That is, they're given instructions not to give into the pressure, but once again, human nature, right? If it's you and there's 10 other people and they're upset, they're pissed off. Some people have, they're louder, they're obnoxious, they're aggressive, and you're sitting in this room and they want to go home to their families, but they can't go home because the case has not been decided, because you needed a unanimous vote, right? And you're the only one, you're the holdout. How many people are you strong enough to withstand that pressure of 10 other people going, hey, I got to get home to my family, I'm done with this trial? That's not taken into account. There's instructions are given, right? Don't give in to pressure, but really, right? There's got to be something else to ensure that doesn't happen. And the last one, and I'll try to go through this one quickly, is after someone is convicted, the system is set up, right, to make it, and depending on what state, what prison, number of situations, it's more difficult or less difficult, but the system is designed and set up so that once you're convicted, you're convicted. They make it incredibly difficult for you to be able to litigate your case, to be able to prove your innocence, to be able to present new evidence, right? It's just incredibly difficult. And like we just talked about earlier, right in the beginning, there's a lot of people that are innocent and get convicted. And then you have people that are overcharged, people that did something real small, but they end up with, 5 to life or 15 to life. And what they did was something that, that did not merit that type of punishment. But they make it incredibly difficult. In the interest of time, we'll have to create another video to really go into this, because I can talk about this for a long time. We're talking about the prison system, right? Within the prison, they have, and there's no accidents, there's no coincidences. It's purposely done that way. They go out of their way to break your spirit, to make it difficult. Every little thing, right, that requires litigating, they make it difficult. In fact, they use it against you when you go, like here in Utah, right? And there's a number of states that have a board of pardons. They will use it against you if you litigate. And when I say use it against you, here in Utah, I've seen the letters from the board saying, if you litigate your case, we will take that into account in making our decision about whether or not to release you and that type of thing. And from experiences, right, that's actual evidence. I've seen the letters from them. And those aren't exact words, I'm paraphrasing. In fact, I think the wording is actually a little bit harsher than that from what I recall. But it's no secret, right? Everybody knows you litigate and they give you more time. Or they'll, instead of giving you a decision, right, when you go see them, they'll say, well, come back in 2 or 3 years when you're done litigating. When you're really supposed to be, based on your guidelines and all that, you're supposed to be released, but they're holding it against you because you decided to litigate. And the prison will go out of their way, getting back to the prison, they'll go out of their way to make it difficult for you to be able to fight your case, whether it's, not providing you access to case law, to the rules, right? Rules of evidence, rules of criminal procedure, not giving you access to a law library, not giving you access to lead pencils, whiteout, not even a prison-approved typewriter, right? That's most, here in Utah, they don't even allow those. Like, they won't even consider them. I tried 4 different times. There was no legitimate reason for denying that. These are specifically designed for that, right? They won't allow that. They increased copies for legal work, right? You got to make copies of, and you got to send out tons of legal work out, right? You got to serve people multiple copies, or everybody, you have to make multiple copies to serve everybody a copy. Otherwise, it's called ex parte communication, and it gets thrown out of court, right? So if you're litigating, you have to make multiple copies, serve every party that has a vested interest, or under the rules or whatever, and give them a copy. And instead of charging you, they used to charge 10 cents, which I thought that was expensive. They bumped it up to 25 cents. And they only pay 40 cents an hour. That's what you start at. And if you work hard and you're diligent, after years, maybe you'll end up making about $1.50 an hour. And if you have to pay 50 cents a page, and each brief is 50, 60, 70 pages, and you got to make 3 copies, do the math, and you have to do this multiple times, and you have to pay for your own, right? Once you start making money, once you make more than $9 per month, actually it's $9 in 45 days, then you have to start paying for all your own stuff: toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, deodorant, shampoo, hygiene, all that stuff, food, right? Because once in a while you don't want to eat the stuff they give you, right? So anyways, I have a whole list of things here, but I want to make this video a little bit shorter. We'll have to delve into this later. I hope this was helpful. This is important. This is an important subject to me because I'd love to be part of the that movement to bring about some change, some positive change. And I'd like to be able to highlight some of the stuff that I don't see other people highlighting. I think it's important. And you understand, this does not affect just people that are, that are brown or black or, whatever. Like, this affects everybody. The only people that are not as affected by this are people that are wealthy. And I don't mean middle class. I mean like upper middle class or like upper class. I'm talking about you make multiple 6 figures, multiple 6 figures. Because if all you make is a couple $100,000 a year, after taxes, what you got, 100 and maybe a little bit over 100,000, and then if you have to defend yourself, to get a good attorney, right? If you want a public defender, if depending on the charges, it could be anywhere from 40, 50,000 to over 100,000. And who's got that kind of cash just sitting around, right, ready to just throw at something like this? So anyways, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was insightful, and yeah, let's bring about some change. Let's do something about this. Look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Thank you, and I'll see you.